Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please raise salute to the flag. This meeting is in compliance with the Open Public Meeting Law and has been duly advertised in the newspaper as an official meeting. Roll call.
Mr. Spaltoff? Present. Mr. Herman? Mr. Acevedo?
Present.
Mr. Burnetsky?
Present.
Mr. Sargent?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh? Present. Mrs. Rivera?
Present. I need a motion for approval of the agenda with addendums.
Motion.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Spaltoff?
Yes.
Mr. Herman?
Yes.
Mr. Acevedo? Yes. Mr. Burnetsky?
Yes.
Mr. Sargent?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
And Mrs. Rivera?
Yes. Now I'd like to turn the meeting over to Ms. Permilli for her superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. So tonight we will begin the superintendent's report with two presentations. The first presentation being our second report period for the violence, vandalism, and HIB report, along with the self-assessment scores for the district scores on HIB. So I call to the podium Security Director Ray Maluski, who will review those numbers through his presentation.
Good evening, everyone. The first report that I'd like to present is the violence and vandalism report for report period 2. On this first slide, we have the numbers, comparison from January of 2020, as well as the most recent numbers for report period 2 for 2021. As I reported in report period 1, we did see a noticeable decrease in our numbers in many of the categories, with the exception of our harassment and intimidation and bullying cases. As you notice, we did have a total of 30 cases reported for report period 2 as compared to 28 last year at this time. In all of our other categories, our numbers obviously have gone down. Violence, vandalism, weapons, incidents, as well as our substance abuse cases. The next slide is a chart with all of our elementary schools listed. Again, across many of our categories, our numbers were 0 for fights, simple assaults, threats, sexual offenses, with the exception of our harassment and intimidation bullying cases. At the elementary level, we had a total of 17 cases reported for report period 2.
Question, why 10 for Swidley?
We did have multiple cases reported at Switlick. There have been previous incidents from report period 1 that have carried over into report period 2. There have been HIB complaints and counter complaints, which did cause an increase in our numbers at the Switlick school. The next slide is our secondary schools. We did have a number of cases reported in regards to our violence at Liberty, Memorial, and also McAuliffe. A total number of HIB cases, I believe, were 13. Our vandalism and substance abuse cases, vandalism incidents across all of our schools, the total was 0. Our cases involving substances, we had a total of 2 marijuana cases where the individual was under the influence. There was one incident where a individual refused an exam. Under our substances cases involving possession, there were 3 possession cases involving marijuana. Drug paraphernalia, alcohol, and any other unauthorized prescription drugs were 0 for report period 2. Weapons offenses for report period 2, a total of 0 across all of our schools. Action taken by our district, by our administrators, for report period 2 for 2021. There were 3 incidents in which the police were notified. There was no complaint filed in those cases. There was 0 cases in which police were notified and a complaint was filed. In-school suspensions, there was 1 case. Out-of-school suspensions, 9. And then a breakdown of student offenders and student victims. We had a total of 10 student offenders and 1 student victim for report period 2. And that concludes the report for violence and vandalism. Any questions?
Yes, I'd like to know the climate that would breed illegality. Are we up on making sure that we tell ourselves the truth and that we keep criminality away and drug pushing and trading and sales away from us? I'm just wondering if we have a vehicle to make sure that we know who's who and what's what and who's promoting and who's selling, and are we aware?
Well, we do.
Or do we wait to catch someone to know that happened? You know, beforehand, a priori.
Well, to best answer your question, communication is a key, a big key in regards to our schools. There is a lot of communication that goes on between our administrators and our security officers, as well as our school resource officers, and it is a very important key and factor in trying to identify these problems in our schools and address these problems. So one of the biggest things that we push in our schools is communication amongst all of our staff members, whether it's our teachers, our administrators, our principals, our security officers, our school resource officers. So yes, we try to pass that information along and address these issues as we become aware of them as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
As far as the HIBs are concerned, how many, approximately, guesstimating, okay, would be social media involved?
I was going to get to that in just a few moments with my HIB report.
Oh, okay.
I will have those numbers up in a moment. You'll be able to see them on the report, and I can explain in a little bit more greater detail. So if you could just wait just a moment. Any other questions? Okay. All right, the next report that I'm going to present is the harassment, intimidation, and bullying report for report period 2. This is a list of our anti-bullying specialists who are in place for report period 2. Two important points that I'd like to point out is that at our middle schools, we did have a changeover from report period 1. We did have a change in personnel. At the Getz School, Mr. Eric Rado did take over for the primary ABS. There was a personnel or unexpected circumstances which required the principal to have Mr. Rado take over the responsibilities of the ABS for report period 2. Also at the McAuliffe School, Wendy Hilly took over the primary responsibilities as the ABS for report period 2. So I'd just like to point that out. So there was a change from report period 1 to report period 2 as in regards to our ABSs at those 2 schools. Some of our events and initiatives, many of the same programs that we saw in report period 1 are bucket filling and positive programs, our peer mediations, morning announcements, school spirit days, social and emotional character education, diversity, equity programs, mindfulness programs. Many of the same programs that we saw in report period 1 were carried over into report period 2. It was I'd like to add that it was a challenging year for our ABSs. The primary challenge was the pandemic itself in implementing and conducting many of their trainings and programs. Overall, they did a very good job, but just like everything else that's related to the pandemic, it was a challenge. This is a breakdown of our alleged and confirmed HIB investigations from 2020 to 2021. As you can see, there were a total of 3 confirmed HIB cases at the elementary level for report period 2, as opposed to 2 cases from 2020. At our secondary schools, we had a total of 2 confirmed HIBs and a breakdown of our middle schools and elementary schools. So again, we did have our fair share of HIB cases for report period 2. The motivating factor for our confirmed HIBs in 3 of those cases, appearance was the motivation for the confirmed HIB. Color was the motivation in 2 of those cases. To answer your question, Mr. Walsh, the location of the investigated HIB incidents, 10 of those incidents were on school grounds. We did see a shift from last year in which we had a larger number of cases which occurred in our classroom. And in report period 2, we did see a shift to many of those cases turning to internet-based cases and cell phone-based cases. So some of that, to answer your question, is social media motivated or involved with social media. School bus cases, there were a total of 4, and we had a total of 4 incidents that occurred off school grounds. The classification of the actions of the investigated HIB incidents, many of our common causes, demeaning type of behavior, offensive text messages, name calling, offensive comments, and so on. The outcomes of all the investigated HIB instances, the consequences in these cases, there were parent-student conferences that were implemented, out-of-school suspensions of privileges. There was a case where a letter of apology was issued. Some of the remedial measures that were utilized were counseling, seating changes, mediation, and conflict resolving lessons for our students. Moving on to our self-assessment grades for 2020-2021. This is broken down into our 8 core elements with the maximum scores for each category. Our Crawford School grade for this year was a total of 71. Elms was a 70. Holman total score was 70. Our Johnson School was a 58. Switlick 73. Rosenauer 55. And for our middle and high schools, Getz was a total of 47, McAuliffe was a total of 50, 71 for Liberty, and 76 for Memorial. Our overall total in our district grade for 2020-2021, we did see a bit of a decrease in the number from last year. The number dropped down to 64.1. Again, this is directly related to the pandemic and some of the personnel issues and the changes from a primary ABS to a backup ABS for report period 2. And that's the end of my HIB report and school self-assessment grades report.
The off-campus events, how did we get the information? How is that, parents, witnesses, how do we get the results of an event that happened off campus?
Correct. Well, most of those incidents are reported via telephone or email is the primary method of communication in which our schools are notified of the complaint.
A parent or a kid?
In most cases at our elementary levels, it is a parent. At our higher grade schools, we will see oftentimes a student report it. But again, in most cases, it is a parent who will report the incident to our school administrators.
All right, thank you.
What will be done moving forward to get back up into the 70s? But I understand the personnel concerns, but a 7-point drop on that is concerning.
Yeah, I'm hopeful moving into the new school year and getting back into a more normal routine and a school schedule, that our ABSs will be able to get back into their normal routines and implement and conduct these programs like they become accustomed to, prior to the pandemic. So I'm very hopeful. We are setting up some training for the upcoming year with our ABSs and perhaps our principals, to review some of our procedures and how we can do things better. So there are things in the works right now to try to improve that grade.
Yeah, if I can just interrupt for 1 second, I believe a lot of the drop was due to the difficulty in being able to implement programs, correct?
Correct.
This is something that's 400 years old. It's more much.
Any other questions? All right, thank you all for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lusky. Okay, what I'd like to do now is call Mr. Joseph Immordino, our food director, to the podium to provide the board with a food service department review for the past year.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Joe Immordino, and I'm the Food Service Director for the district. For all the other board members, good evening, and it's nice to see you all. So tonight, I'm going to discuss and review a list of accomplishments from the past year. We're going to discuss how we got there, demonstrate our financial performance for 2020 and 2021, discuss some challenges that we face, our plan for moving forward, and at the end, some acknowledgements. This year, we experienced a very successful financial year. The Food Service Department had a very favorable technical review by the state with no corrective actions. We were able to provide meals to hybrid students, the in-school students, and the remote learners as well. We kept our food costs well below industry standard despite the COVID issues, and our increase in participation in breakfast, primarily due to the meals being taken home daily, as well as meals sent home to the remote learners, as opposed to a normal structure of the students coming into the cafeterias on a daily basis. How we got here, it's a little brief history. As we are all aware, COVID-19 started in March 2020. All meals were provided to students for free from March through June. All students were remote learners during this time period. From March through June, we served meals via pickup at various locations, and we provided delivery service as well. For the school year 2021, the USDA continued to mandate free meals to all students. Over the summer, plans were developed and executed, and with lunch being built into the K-8 schedules. K-8 schools served a hybrid meal service in school and meal pickup at the end of the day. The meals included breakfast and lunch for the next days. High schools, we provided grab-and-go meals at dismissal, and meals included breakfast and lunch for those students as well. In February, as you know, the elementary schools went to five-day classrooms, education, and grab-and-go meals were provided at the end of the day. In March, the same thing for the middle schools, and we provided meals at the end of the day for them. And in April, the high school started five-day education, and again, they were continuing to receive the grab-and-go meals at the end of the day. This meal format continued until the end of the year for all levels. All remote learners via transportation, via our transportation department, as well as pickup from each high school. They were all provided 5 days worth of meals. With regard to our financial performance, as you can see, our total revenue was well over $2.9 million. This has been a record year. Our profit was $542,000 and change, and this is including an indirect cost of $200,000 that the Food Service Department made back to the district. If we did not provide that, we would have made over well over $740,000, you can see. Our food cost was 21.85%, which is well below the industry standard of 40%, and our labor cost was 50.17%. Our other costs was 7.46%, and that included the indirect cost that was given back to the district. If not, we would have been below 1% of our indirect cost. As you can see, what our costs include our uniform. Sorry, technical difficulty. Our uniforms, repairs, can you hear me? Office supplies, cleaning supplies, and so on. One thing I would like to reiterate is the fact that this was made, our financial success was made predominantly because of the effective planning and leadership by Mr. Corrali, Mr. Richardson, and as well as the rest of the executive administrators. Many of my colleagues did not have anything remotely close to the success that we had. And because of the decisions that were made specifically to include the food service program into the educational format was head and shoulders above anyone else that was doing anything somewhat similarly. And we were in a position to be very, very successful. So for that, thank you all very much for keeping food services on the front burner as opposed to the back burner. Okay, statistically, breakfast at the high school, lunch for high school were exactly the same, specifically because we were in a position to provide those same meals every single day. There was no deviation from that. At the middle schools, served 68,000 and change for breakfast and 99,000 and change for lunch, and predominantly because more students were taking the lunches as opposed to breakfast. And specifically because at the middle and elementary school, and this is specifically why there's such a big spike between the breakfast and lunch programs, is because during the first half of the year, we were serving lunch in the cafeteria. Well, we were serving lunch from the cafeterias as well as providing the meals to the students from a pickup standpoint as well, from a grab-and-go standpoint. Once February and March, respectively, for the middle and elementary schools kicked in, then things began to level off. But for the first 7 months of the school year, we were able to tap into providing meals in school for the students. And as you can see, the remote meals were 105,000. Normally, we provide with a year-to-year comparison, but since these past 2 years were so disproportionate, I didn't see the value in it. However, the closest I can give you is 2018-2019 statistics. As you can see, the breakfast numbers truly spiked, over 555% greater in 2021 as opposed to 18-19. For lunch, you saw a slight decline, but please be mindful of something. If you look at the bottom number, the enrollment also dropped by about 5.6%. So if you see a drop in almost 3 points, statistically, we actually did better. And if you look at the participation percentage, which is relative to the enrollment, you can see that, again, the breakfast spiked because we were able to provide for the students on a grab-and-go basis. And then again, the lunch participation actually increased. And again, this relative to the enrollment. Okay, and the average daily participation, which basically means how many meals per day we were serving. Again, you can see 555% spike in the first, and again, 2.9+% negative. But again, 5.06% of the enrollment was had declined. Try it again. We're going to try a third time. Some of the challenges that we faced during the course of the year, the rising cost and product availability, specifically of the PPE items. Just to give you a quick example, one of the major items that we had problems with was gloves. Before the pandemic, we were paying about $25, $26 a case for them. During the pandemic, it spiked to about $89 to $90 a case for the same exact product, and the availability was minimal at best. The other big factor is the declining enrollment. Again, you can see almost 400 students. This is from a comparison from last year. That 5.06% was from last year. So if I go back to my original statistic, I based that number is incorrect. So it's a much higher number because we have more students in 18 and 19. Collection of the negative balances, we're looking at a deficit of $8,400. And again, we had some staffing concerns specifically due to COVID. So as we move forward to the coming year, here's what we can expect. Pursuant to the USDA, all breakfast and lunches are free to all students for the year. High schools, we will be providing a single unit lunch. Also, we are going to provide grab-and-go lunches, breakfast for all students at the dismissal. We have a little bit of history with this now because we've done it for an entire year, and I believe that this will be of great benefit to all the students. Our primary concern is going to be with supply chain issues by our manufacturers and distributors. Excuse me. We will need to manage any revised USDA and NJDA COVID-19 guidelines as they arise, and effectively continue to manage operational and financial challenges post-COVID-19, the annual minimum wage increases, and contractual obligations. Overall, we're going to plan on streamlining our selections and snacks and continue to provide healthy meal options for both in-school as well as grab-and-go breakfast. And the next several slides are pictures of our Jackson staff and some of the food selections that we had provided to the students. So you just go through those out. Thank you. And this is our food service staff. These are some of the meals that we prepared and distributed. As you can see, pastas, stuffed shells, some Asian items, some Mexican items, and all went exceptionally well. We were very pleased to receive a lot of complimentary and thankful emails from our families. Okay, and we plan to continue to work with the district and building administrators to ensure efficient and nutritious meals service during the school year. And I'm going to continue to work with vendors to make sure that we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck with food and packaging. Our primary concern will be to continue to safeguard the food service employees, the students, and building employees by just maintaining good and healthy cleaning standards as well. Pursuant to the USDA, all students are going to be receiving free breakfast and lunch. So there's no recommendation for any meal prices because the USDA and the federal government said it's okay to serve them for free.
Are there any questions of the board?
I have a question for the superintendent.
I'm sorry?
I have a question for you and for the superintendent. Okay, do we have a strategic plan for providing food during testing for students to be fed when we're during important tests or examinations where it affects the performance if they haven't eaten?
As Mr. Immordino just mentioned, breakfast is free and available to all of our students, so we will encourage them during testing times to ensure that they are taking advantage of that. And that's something we've always done in regards to always encouraging that the students eat a healthy breakfast, and where we can, we provide it. But this year, fortunate, that we will be able to offer that to all students.
Okay. I have a question for you. I happen to know that there are times when there's waste. Kid gets and just throws out the food. Now, what is our history with that, or what do we do about that? And also, I happen to know also that some of the students tell me, who are neighbors, that they'll have an apple that is not ripe yet, and they will not eat it. A pear, it's too hard to eat, they just throw it out. And not that I'm an expert, agrarian or food vendor, but at the same time, sometimes we provide the kid an item that is just not ready for them.
Okay, so
So
in
they
answer
throw
to
the
your,
apple out.
certainly, in answer to your first question, we don't do anything. If a student chooses to discard their meal, they can. We do not provide a share table, and specifically, we don't do that because it's the health department frowns upon that because we're taking even though the food is unconsumed, it's on a table, and anybody, if someone is sick and if someone has a cold and they're handling an apple and they put the apple down, so there's a big disconnect with the Department of Health, and that's been an ongoing question since I've been here.
But
Why can't we do this?
We do keep an eye out for waste,
I understand now.
trends.
I understand that, but the concern, the problem that we have is that once it leaves our cafeteria, we have zero control over what the students do with it.
Okay.
I mean, and again, this is part of, sadly, it's part of our ongoing daily operations. What our program with the National School Lunch Program is what's called an offer versus served, which means that we can offer all 5 components to the students, and they have to take at least 3 of them to be considered a reimbursable meal. And they have that opportunity. If they don't want the apple, they don't have to take the apple. Okay, but and if they don't want the milk, they don't have to take the milk. We don't force it upon them.
Okay, not to belabor the point, I don't think my question has been answered, so I'm going to ask it again. The thing is, do we do something about educating the child as to the importance of not wasting food? Do we have like programs?
From our department?
Yeah.
No, I do not.
Because I would suggest that we figure out a way to, just as we have recycling and all that, we don't like to waste and create dirt or whatever. We should also let the kid know that if you waste it, you're also wasting money. I'm just suggesting something.
Okay.
And I know that maybe our administration could develop something.
Certainly, I can get with Mr. Rotanti and Mr. Baginski and talk to them about some ideas within perhaps the health classes that maybe they might discuss, because I know there should be a component for nutrition, correct?
If I can just interrupt for a second, I was just about to say that, yes, Mr. Mordino, there is that component in our health programs, but Mr. Acevedo, I understand what you're saying, that it should continue and expand into the cafeterias to support that as well, but it is part of our health curriculum as well.
Because even if they get the lunch for free and the board gets the lunch for free, it's never free and it's not our money.
Understood.
Wasted money at any level is wasted money that is not ours to waste.
Certainly, and I will work on some communication within the cafeterias as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are we
Yes, sir.
anticipating any increased food costs over the next 12 months? Is that budgeted for?
The short answer is yes.
we have
Much
a-
like we all are experiencing in our day-to-day lives. There are a lot of factors involved. There's major employment shortages, help shortages. There's transportation issues. There's a major drought out west where it's going to provide, where it's beginning to be problematic for, say, produce, for example, to be in. So I think, in general, not just our department, but in general, I think we're all going to see a big hit on that.
Do we have contracts on the non-perishable items going forward that will be able to hedge?
I just negotiated a new, we belong to a co-op, and I negotiated a deal that is going to be very beneficial to all the school districts that's part of our co-op, and including us. So the short answer is we're doing everything we possibly can to ensure and reduce our costs. One item, for example, one of the components of our food program is, believe it or not, the Department of Defense has a produce program that we can tap into. Over the past several years, I've only allocated $30,000, which basically is $30,000 worth of free produce. This year, I've allocated $50,000. So there's an additional spike in that. And I can also tell you that the USDA and the New Jersey Department of Agriculture, they're very proactive to, if monies are out there to be spent and available, they will ask and we will ask. And last year, quite frankly, we had $30,000 budgeted, and I asked for another $15,000, and they were able to give it to us quite readily. So yeah, and trust me, if you saw the 21% food cost, I'm very cost conscious. So I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make sure that
Also,
that number stays
the
down.
labor shortages being 50%, I believe.
I'm sorry?
The labor expenses is part of our costs?
That's correct.
You said it was about 50 some odd
50%, correct.
50%. Is that industry standard?
That's a tough question to say because industry standard for self-ops, we're in line. Industry standard for like contract services, we're higher, and specifically because of the benefit costs. Most, a lot of the contractors don't, they don't offer or provide benefits to all of their employees. Most of them follow the federal standard of working a minimum of 30 hours before benefits kick in.
Thank you.
How do you get reimbursed?
I'm sorry?
How do you get reimbursed from the FDA? Do they give you money up front to buy the materials,
No.
or is it a la carte, or per diem?
So our process is every month we collect all the meal counts, we put it into a program, we calculate what a reimbursement is, and a month and a half later we get a check.
Okay.
So
It's per diem, per diem.
yes.
One question. Regarding paper costs, did you notice a distinct increase in paper costs this year compared to, or last year compared to the year before?
Absolutely, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, because if you go back to one of the slides, just to give you an idea, we've never had aluminum containers for distribution. So the aluminum in and of itself is expensive, but those were, thank you. Those were items that I thought were going to benefit us with regard to making sure that the food goes home safely and actually to be thermalized very quickly by virtue of just putting it in the oven. A lot of the food that we did prepare was not hot, it was cold, and the students did get instructions on what to do and how long to cook it for. So that's why we did that. And also to give them the type of, the quality of food that they were receiving. So that was a problem. The gloves were an issue. Styrofoam is starting to kick up because of the petroleum in the styrofoam itself. So yes, the short answer is we saw a pretty significant increase in our paper cost over the years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Mr. Immordino, and thank you to your entire staff for a very challenging year and ensuring that our students were fed well and taken care of, and their families, I know, appreciated that. So thank you for all the hard work between you and your staff.
Thank you. If you don't mind, if you give me like 2 minutes, I'd just like to make a couple of quick acknowledgments, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Go right
All
ahead.
right. So again, I'd like to just acknowledge several people in departments. First of which, Transportation Department needs a big shout out because they were instrumental in getting over 150 meals out to the families on a weekly basis. I'd also like to thank, he's not here, Ed Offstraw for his years of service and his personal help to our department. We wish him well in his retirement. And I'd like to also express my heartfelt thanks to my staff, specifically my assistant Judy Hackett and Lynn Spall for their hard work and dedication during my absence in handling all the day-to-day operations and the COVID-related issues, and certainly the administrators, the building administrators for, again, their cooperation and flexibility. Finally, on a personal note, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude and thanks to Mrs. Permelli and Ms. Richardson. This year was especially difficult for me personally, and both Ms. Permelli and Ms. Richardson were caring, understanding, and compassionate beyond words can express. Your support and kindness allowed me to concentrate on my personal matters, and your kindness, caring, support, and compassion will never be forgotten. So I thank you very much.
You're very welcome, and thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
So moving on to a few items before I turn it back to you, Ms. Rivera. I did want to just check in with the board and let you know that all of our summer programs are up and running, and our administrators have been busy overseeing the programs. Our teachers have been busy. We've got our enrichment programs happening at all levels, our summer learning program at the elementary level, our Jump Start program at the middle school level, our credit recovery programs at the middle school and high school level, and our extended school year special education ESY program. So lots of programs and lots of students receiving instruction and social emotional learning throughout the summer, and kudos to the entire team that have been working and putting that together. Also this week, the entire administrative team was at Liberty working together. We did team building, we did planning and looking at supports that we can put into place for both our staff and students in the fall. We are setting vision, setting goals, and most recently we closed today with a legal update from Mr. Mark Zinnemer of all of the legal things that we need to keep an eye on moving forward as well. We will be updating the community with any changes to any fall guidelines. As you know, our plan is up on the website for the return to school based on the New Jersey Department of Ed guidelines at this moment. We also know that things can change. We'll keep our eyes open for change, but at this moment, we're planning hopefully to provide the community and the board a further update in August. So with that, I turn it back to you, Ms. Rivera.
Thank you, Ms. Permelli. The standing committee reports, the first one, state and county school board rep. The next meeting is July 29th to go over the calendar and locations of the county meetings. Parent group liaison, Mr. Brunetsky.
Next meeting is October 2021.
And the special education will be meeting in August, and the next SEAC meeting will be in October. Scholarship, Mr. Walsh and Mr. Brunetsky.
No report.
Buildings and ground, Mr. Sargent.
No report.
Budget and finance, Mr. Walsh.
No report at this time.
Transportation, Mr. Walsh.
No report at this time. Oh, well, you'll see that later on. We hired a new leader in transportation.
Liberty bus ribbon cutting.
Negotiations and Teamsters,
The depot.
Mr. Sargent.
We came to an agreement with the Teamsters. We signed an MOA, and we're looking forward to working with them for the next 3 or 4 years. Thank you.
Curriculum committee will be August 11th. We'll be meeting, and then the policy committee will be to be announced. I need a motion for approval of policies, first reading.
Motion for policies, first reading.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Spalta,
Yes.
Mr. Herman,
Yes.
Mr. Acevedo,
Yes.
Mr. Brunetsky,
Yes.
Mr. Sargent,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera,
Yes. I need a motion for approval of the minutes from the closed session meeting June 23rd, 2021, and the official board meeting of June 23rd, 2021, Committee of the Whole Business Meeting.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Spalta,
Yes.
Mr. Herman,
Yes.
Mr. Acevedo,
Yes.
Mr. Brunetsky,
Yes.
Mr. Sargent,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera,
Yes. I need a motion for approval of the bill list.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Spalta,
Yes.
Mr. Herman,
Pay the bills.
Pay the bill.
I'm
Yes.
sorry,
It's a
didn't,
yes.
thank you. Mr. Acevedo,
Yes.
Mr. Brunetsky,
Yes.
Mr. Sargent, Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera.
Yes. I need a motion for approval of the treasurer's and board secretary's report.
Motion for treasurers and board secretary report.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Spalta,
Yes.
Mr. Herman,
Yes.
Mr. Acevedo,
Yes.
Mr. Brunetsky,
Yes.
Mr. Sargent,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera.
Yes. I need a motion to open the public forum on agenda items only. We will hold another public forum during this meeting for other questions. This public forum will be for questions on the agenda only.
Move.
Second.
Please sign in and state your name and whether or not you're a Jackson resident. Each person is allowed a maximum of 5 minutes to speak. No person may speak more than once on a topic until all others have been heard.
Madam President, seeing no one come forward, I make a motion to close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? I need a motion to move finance.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Spaltoff,
Yes.
Mr. Herman,
Yes.
Mr. Acevedo,
Yes.
Mr. Brunetsky,
Yes.
Mr. Sargent,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera.
Yes. I need a motion to move facilities.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Spaltoff,
Yes.
Mr. Herman,
Yes.
Mr. Acevedo,
Yes.
Mr. Brunetsky,
Yes.
Mr. Sargent,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
and Mrs. Rivera.
Yes. I need a motion to move programs.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion?
Question about number 9. Okay, this has to deal with the grant towards electric school buses. If we don't get this grant, are we still purchasing the school buses, but they'll be gasoline?
I can answer that. What the plan is, and I had a meeting with one of the companies today about it, you have to, I think I put that in the note also to you, is that we can put in the grant that we want to purchase, say 2. Like we're interested in 2 of these electric buses. So we would still be responsible for the amount of money that we would have purchased a regular bus for. So we would only be out what we would normally be out with purchasing 2 buses. They would they would give us the rest of the money. Like say it's 80,000 or 90,000 for a bus, they would give us the 310,000 for the rest of it. To purchase the electric bus. So it's a program where you don't lose money in doing it, but however, you know, you still have to put out some money towards it.
Okay, so this would be pushing us towards the requirement in 2023 to have a completely electric fleet, correct?
It's down the road, whereas I believe it's 2035. They expect you to have all electric vehicles. So a district this size, it doesn't hurt us to start. You know,
Okay.
with programs like this where it's not really costing us anything more, we've learned already that it does cost us something. But this is the best way for us to get started in that, because we would never have the resources to buy a whole fleet when the time comes.
Got it.
Roll call.
Mr. Spaltoff,
Yes.
Mr. Herman,
Yes.
Mr. Acevedo,
Yes.
Mr. Brunetsky,
Yes.
Mr. Sargent,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
and Mrs. Rivera.
Yes. I need a motion to move students.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Spaltoff,
Yes.
Mr. Herman,
Yes.
Mr. Acevedo,
Yes.
Mr. Brunetsky,
Yes.
Mr. Sargent,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
and Mrs. Rivera.
Yes. I need a motion to move personnel.
Motion to move personnel.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Spaltoff,
Yes.
Mr. Herman,
Yes.
Mr. Acevedo,
Yes.
Mr. Brunetsky,
Abstain on anything transportation related, yes to everything else.
Mr. Sargent,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera,
Yes. I need a motion to open public forum on any topics pertaining to the Board of Education. Please sign in and state your name and whether or not you're a Jackson resident. Each person is allowed a maximum of 5 minutes to speak. No person may speak more than once on a topic until all others have been heard.
Motion to open public forum.
Second.
Move to close?
Seeing no one come forward, I need a motion to close the second public forum.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Board comments, starting with Mr. Spaltoff.
Just congratulations to the new interim transportation director, to the new athletics director, and to our new math and science supervisor.
Mr. Sargent?
I'd like to do the same. Congratulations to the three of you. I know that all three of you are going to be up to the challenge. It's a big one. I'd also like to say that the Transportation Department has given Ms. Primelli its challenges, but I know that the Transportation Department is going to step up to the task. Thank you. Have a good night.
Mr. Herman?
Yeah, I'd like to congratulate all the personnel which we've confirmed tonight, from every para, from every department head, to every teacher. From the few that we saw, the district has done a great job hiring, and I congratulate Ms. Primelli for being in charge of the hiring, and everybody who was rehired to a job for next year. Thank you.
Mr. Acevedo?
I agree. The professionalism with which we chose the new professionals is the reason why the school district will move forward and advance. So I compliment the superintendent for her good work and their administration beneath her.
Mr. Bernetsky?
Congratulations as well to the three new hires, and I want to thank Mr. Imardino and Mr. Maluski for their reports tonight. Have a good evening.
Mr. Walsh?
I would say ditto, and it's been a positive night as far as, new faces with new ideas, will only help this district.
I want to thank everyone for coming, the presentations and input. I want to congratulate to our three new members on their positions. Thank you, Ms. Primelli and her staff, for all of your hard work throughout. And everyone have a great and safe night. Adjourn? I need a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn. Motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to adjourn.